Reaction to President Trump's remarks concerning the violence that occurred yesterday at a white supremacist rally in Charlottesville, Virginia. We'll hear from Colorado Senator Cory Gardner, former White House Communications Director Anthony Scaramucci, National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster, and Charlottesville Mayor Michael Signer.
Well, this is not a time for vagaries. This isn't a time for innuendo or to allow room to be read between the lines. This is a time to lay blame on bigotry, to lay blame on white supremacists, on white nationalism, and on hatred. And that needs to be said. This president has done an incredible job of naming terrorism around the globe as evil, radical Islamic terrorism, whether it's in Europe or the Middle East. He has said and called it out time and time again, and this president needs to do exactly that today. Call this white supremacism, this white nationalism evil, and let the country hear it, let the world hear it. It's something that needs to come from the Oval Office, and this White House needs to do it today.
I think he needed to be much harsher as it related to the white supremacists and the nature of that. I applaud General McMaster for calling it out for what it is. It's actually terrorism, and whether it's domestic or international terrorism, with the moral authority of the presidency, you have to call that stuff out.
But the question is, why didn't the president do that? You know him well.
Well, I think Alex mentioned one of the reasons why he doesn't like doing that. He likes doing the opposite of what the media thinks he's going to do. I think he's also of the impression that there is hatred on all sides. But I disagree with it. And so, but here's the thing, whether I was the White House Communications Director or not, I don't think you're going to change the president. The president's going to do what he wants to do, how he wants to do it. But I think it's important for the people around him, George, to give them direct advice, to be blunt with him. I think he respects bluntness and he respects candor. And I certainly would have never suggested him doing that.
But is there anyone in the White House right now who says, boy, you just made a real mistake there?
I think people are probably reluctant to tell him the truth. Maybe Ivanka would do that. You saw her tweet this morning. Maybe Jared would do that. But you also got this sort of Bannon-Bart influence in there, which I think is a snag on the president. If the president really wants to execute that legislative agenda that I think is so promising for the American people, the lower middle class people and the middle class people, then he has to move away from that sort of Bannon-Bart nonsense.
So you mean Bannon and Breitbart, Steve Bannon?
That the whole thing is nonsensical.
When he condemned bigotry and hatred on all sides, that includes white supremacists and neo-Nazis. And I think it's clear, I know it's clear in his mind, and it ought to be clear to all Americans. We cannot tolerate, obviously, that bigotry, that hatred that is rooted in ignorance of what America stands for, what America is.
Should we expect to hear, instead of from you, from him, some of those words?
I'm sure you will hear from the president more about this. I mean, this is important to the president to bring all Americans together. He said what we all have to be is all of us have to be Americans first, and that's our common identity as Americans, grounded in our commitment to liberty, to human rights, to equal rights, and to tolerance over this kind of hatred and bigotry.
When you watched all this yesterday, what was your reaction?
It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. You know, as a soldier, what you see in our military is you see men and women from all walks of life, all different backgrounds come together in their common commitment to their country and to each other. And then you see them in combat, fighting courageously for our nation and our values. Everybody bleeds the same color. And we're bound together as soldiers, and we ought to be as a nation, bound together by mutual respect and common commitment to our values.
Was that domestic terrorism yesterday?
I think what terrorism is the use of violence to incite terror and fear. And of course it was terrorism.
So you do classify that as terrorism?
Well, and from a legal sense, there'll be a full investigation, as you know, but certainly I think we can confidently call it a form of terrorism.
You, on one hand, thank the president for condemning the violence, but you added this. You said, I do hope he looks in the mirror, himself in the mirror, and thinks very deeply about who he consorted with during the campaign. What are you referring to there?
It's an old saying, when you dance with the devil doesn't change, the devil changes you. And I think they made a choice in that campaign, a very regrettable one, to really go to people's prejudices, to go to the gutter. I mean, these influences around the country, these anti-Semites, racists, Aryans, Nazis, KKK, they were always in the shadows, but you know, they've been given a key and a reason to come into the light. That's exactly what happened last week. If you looked at the chatter online, they said this will be a shot heard around the world. This will be alt-right 2.0 in Charlottesville. The time has come for this to stop. This should be a turning point. This movement jumped the shark, and it happened yesterday. People are dying, and I do think that it's now on the president and on all of us to say enough is enough. This movement has run its course.
And for more on the situation in Charlottesville, we talked to a reporter who covered the event on Washington Journal.
The New York Times reads, "White nationalist protest leads to deadly violence." One of the authors of that article this morning, Cheryl Gay Stolberg, is on the ground in Charlottesville, Virginia. Good morning, Ms. Stolberg. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Good morning.
Well, what can you tell us about the city's mood late last night and this morning? We heard that the governor, Terry McAuliffe, asking for those white nationalists to leave the state. Any evidence that that's happened?
Well, I would say the city's mood is quiet but tense. I did talk to a spokesman for the rally, the white nationalist rally organizer last night. He said that there was nothing planned for today except that they were going to issue a statement and that they're planning to hold a press conference on Monday, possibly in Alexandria, Virginia, or D.C. So I haven't been out on the streets this morning, but I was late last night, and I can tell you that the streets of downtown were very quiet. A lot of police out there patrolling, a lot of streets closed off. So most people who were out there, if they were out there, were media, and very few walking the streets of downtown. Ordinarily, it would be a very lively nightlife on the downtown mall of Charlottesville.
Well, take us back to yesterday morning and what you saw. Tell us about what the flashpoint was between the white nationalist groups and counter-protesters. What happened there?
Well, what the white nationalists started massing in the city park called McIntyre Park around 9 o'clock, and the counter-protesters had gathered at a church for a sunrise service. And each made their way separately to Lee Park, or it's actually called Emancipation Park now. It used to be Lee Park, where the statue of Robert E. Lee was, or is. The white nationalists gathered inside the park, as they had the right to do by their permit, and the counter-protesters encircled the park from the outside. And it was very, very tense, and as more and more and more people came, more white nationalists and more counter-demonstrators, things got violent. I witnessed skirmishes, street fights, people clubbing one another in the street as the white nationalists tried to make their way into Lee Park. And ultimately, I didn't witness the actual flashpoint inside the park, but at around 11 o'clock or so, the police declared an unlawful assembly, the barricades started coming down, and things just turned into absolute chaos.
We're getting reports this morning of the arrest of the driver in that incident with that killed one person, James Alex Fields from Ohio. Have police released any information on the victim, the one person who was killed in that attack?
As of late last night, they had not released a name. They had said it was a 32-year-old woman. They were notifying next of kin. I haven't checked this morning, but I have not heard yet if there's a name released.
What are your coverage plans this morning? Where do you plan to put yourself and to follow today?
Well, I'm only one person. I have colleagues joining me. We'll probably go to some church services because this is a community that really is wrestling with what is happening here and trying to understand. And I myself will be trying to figure out what went wrong. How did this get so out of hand? What happened with the police response? So I'll probably head out and just do a swing around the streets. But frankly, I don't expect much in the way of protest or street action today. I could be wrong, though. So we will take a wait-and-see attitude on that.
Well, when you got down, did you expect much? When you came down, I assume on Friday at some point, were you expecting that there would be tension or perhaps violence?
I didn't know what to expect. Honestly, my gut told me that there would not be violence because the city had taken such great pains to prepare, and because a month ago there was a KKK demonstration here that ended with police using tear gas on the protesters. So my thought was that since the city had a lot of advanced knowledge of this, that they would have found a way to keep the peace. So I didn't really know what was going to happen. I certainly didn't expect things to get so out of hand as they did yesterday, and especially with that terrible, terrible car crashing into the crowd of people. It was just horrific.
Well, Cheryl Gay-Stolberg, we appreciate you joining us this morning. We'll look for your reporting today and this coming week at nytimes.com and on Twitter at Cheryl NYT. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And Vice President Mike Pence and his wife Karen left today to begin their tour of Central and South American countries. First, he meets with the President of Colombia later today. Then over the next 5 days, visits Argentina, Chile, and